Okay, everyone, welcome to session number 5 of the Art and Science of Color. So we are getting into the home stretch today. So today we're going to go over it's going to be our first week of actually looking at color systems for actually choosing colors, right? Up to now, we've been trying to basically understand colors, but we're actually going to look at some color systems this week where we can actually make some choices and try to get some colors that work together and talk about why certain colors would work together better than others. So. But first and foremost, I want to go and just do a quick review of the last time and just talk very briefly about the homework. So I'm going to switch to this. Is that good? Yeah. Okay, remove that. No. Okay, it's slightly different than it was before. Hold on. I just want to pin this video. Replace pin. Okay, there we go. Okay, so there's our chart from before. And here is the homework. So I actually made a decision yesterday to switch the order that for the last 2 classes. So we're going to talk about these color systems today. That is so this assignment actually will be more useful. We'll go over it in more depth next week when we talk about color dynamics. But the one thing I wanted to point out to all of you is that, and it looks a little bit different in the picture than in reality, but one of the things I wanted to point out to you is something that I said before, which is about how your mind, when it perceives color, it's looking to form groupings, right? That's part of how it's looking for patterns and it's looking to form groupings. This is this idea of heuristics. And it's basically that your body is trying to imprint, your mind is trying to imprint a pattern so that then it can learn to recognize that pattern so that it can then, when it sees that pattern again, apply the same rules. It's what we talked about before, how you learn to recognize, say, for example, grass or concrete or leaves, right? We don't need to see the individual leaves to know they're leaves. We can just look at it and recognize the pattern. So our brains naturally want to simplify things into patterns. And one of the things I want to talk about, and we're going to get really into specifics about it next week, is that if you notice on this thing, and you'll notice that, for example, you start to see shapes, for example, here, right? These are all different, there are different colors happening here, right? This is a different color than this. But if you look at this long enough, you start to see groupings because your mind wants to see groupings. It does not want to see and make differentiations, small differentiations between all these different colors. The idea being that you can, as an artist, you can manipulate that fact. And that's really a very important idea. It's not just that you recognize it's happening, but that as an artist who's choosing colors, choosing how to organize a space, what you want to do is actually manipulate the fact that, and utilize the fact that people will naturally look for patterns. Okay, so that we will go into much more depth next week when we, like I said, when we talk about spatial dynamics. This week, we're going to talk about color systems. Okay, so now, just to review, right? So here's our trusty notes from last time. Slide the camera over. And see if I can get them a little bit straighter. No, not that way. That way. Okay. So we talked about saturation. And saturation has to do with how intense the color is, Or basically, the best way to think about it is how brown the color is, how dull the color is. And brown really is the right term to think of, not gray, not weak or lighter or darker, but I actually think of it as brown. Now, so just to go over things again, we all know these colors very much. The point really that I want to make is that they do make up the majority of colors that we see in the world. And it's really important to recognize that fact. Oh, shoot, did my phone go dead? Oh, no, it's just telling me the battery is low. I need to plug it in, sorry guys. But it cuts it when it sees that the battery is low. Hang on. Oh shoot, did it? I don't think it died. Hold on, sorry about this, guys. I got it. I moved it and then it unplugged itself. Shoot. Okay, guys, so I am going to have to do this a little bit the hard way because the phone did, in fact, when I moved the thing just at the beginning of class, it did actually cut the phone. So hold on. I have to do this. So we have to wait for the phone to come back on, but we'll just use the other camera for now, and I'll hold everything up. Okay, so back to me. All right, for now. So I will put this all in notes, which you will have. You'll have a copy of this. You will have a copy of the notes that we have done for class. As I think you can tell they're all on one piece of brown paper, and I'm going to be sending you a screenshot of that, so you'll have everything. But to go over what I said last time, the important thing to understand is that the desaturated color, meaning not the most intense color, not the brightest red, not the brightest yellow, the brightest green, those colors do make up the majority of what we see. And when you look around the world, particularly the natural world, you will see that almost everything is made up of those colors. Why do I say that? Why is that important? Because those colors are the workhorses of your of the things that you're designing, of the things you're making color choices for. Everyone will remember the bright color. All the work happens in the duller colors. The duller colors are what make the brighter colors have the impact that they have. And it's really, that's very important to emphasize. Okay, so and if you look at paintings, you'll see the disproportionate amount of work that actually goes into those seemingly less important areas. Okay, so that's the first thing. Now, here's what, I think I'm gonna maybe try to do this with the camera. Let me see if I can do this on the screen. I don't know, it's a little bit upside down for me. So let's see if I can get this to go. All right, I'm gonna try this, right? If I write now, will that be up, right side up? That's me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. So I'm gonna give this a try. So as I said before, the most important aspect of this is that these non-brightest colors, they're really your workhorses. Now, here's the best way to think about everything that we've done so far. And is to really think in terms of three, can you see this? Color families. I'm not sure because I cannot see the screen right now. Right. Is that coming through? I think it is. Okay. So think of three color families, right? Instead of trying to get so intense about all the different aspects and remember all the different things that I talked about, if you can really think in terms of, rather than about all the rules about saturation, all the rules about hue, all the rules about value, just think in terms of these families, right? And it sort of works really nicely because they happen to be, at least in English, typical family names, right? So let's think about the greens, the browns, and the grays. All right? And these are your basic groupings. And it's important that we call them instead of, and what I'm talking about here are things in the green, in the area of green, things related to green, things in the area of brown, related to brown, and things in the area of gray. And the reason I'm not calling them green, red, and blue is because the majority of the colors that fall into those categories are not actually those colors. As I said, 99% of colors are not the most high intensity colors. So we really need to think of it as a big family of, in this case, brownish colors where red is just one of the members. So we'll talk about the browns for begin. So of course it includes red and all its friends, right? So it includes pink. It includes crimson. It includes orange. But it also includes brown. Brown is a big category, but let's just call it what I like to call, let's just say things like chocolate. All right, that lighter chocolate, which maybe we could call milk chocolate. But it also includes tan and beige and ecru. Ecru, I think is right. I may be wrong about that. I think maybe that C doesn't belong there. Okay. So it also includes that. It also includes all skin tones. All right, lightest to darkest fall in that category. Okay, so this is the broad category of the browns. Sorry, I shouldn't have quite written it this way, but oops. Okay. Now, the greens, and the reason we call it the greens is that, as I said, green is the grouping where it's the one where we tends to be the broadest, right? When we have a light red, we call it pink. But when we have a light green, we just call it light green. Also, when we look at colors like olive or colors like teal or colors like our grass green, that sort of bluish green, all of these types of colors, we still classify as green. Aquamarine, all of these different desaturated colors, when we look at them, we still generally call them all greens, which is a little bit unusual for this grouping. And so that includes things like green, of course, our yellow green, which we talked about is the one that your eye sees. That's the one your green receptor sees most intensely. But it also includes yellow. Right? It includes things like olive, but also your green browns like moss and raw umber. Okay, all of those things fall under this green category. Right? We could even talk about things like ochre and raw sienna, all in this category. And one of these, with these yellow colors, one of the tests of whether it's in the green category, because of course there are things on the border between greens and browns. If you add black to it, if it turns green, then it's in the green family. Okay? So now, the grays. Grays include things like blue. They also include violet, which, as we talked about, violet is not the mix of red and blue. Violet is the extreme end. It is the last color your eye can see before it can no longer see blue. It's at the very edge of your perception. And so this violet is, of course, related to, as we talked about before, ultraviolet. So in other words, this blue color, as it gets closer and closer to ultraviolet, which means actually the frequency of the waves goes up and up, gets much faster. Right before it leaves your perception, it actually looks a little bit purple. And that's the violet that we talk about. Okay, that's not the same as the magenta, which we talked about before. Okay, so we talk about blue in this category, and of course, but I would also put things like turquoise. And as we talked about, the secondary colors really tend to group with one of these families. Each one groups with a different one. So in this case, cyan, right? Of course, indigo, sky blue, but also the grays like slate, right? And most things that we think of as medium gray. Right. So one of the tests of whether a gray actually falls under the category of being in the blue family, right, is when you increase the saturation, almost all grays will go to, all the things that we categorize as grays will normally go to blue when you increase the saturation. And then the special category that applies to the grays is black. Most blacks, of course, black is the absence of any hue, but blue goes, as it gets darker and darker, blue becomes something we perceive as black much quicker than any of these, either of these other categories, because blue is already dark to begin with. It's the one we have the most difficulty seeing. All right, one of the colors, sorry, excuse me. So this is that's the gray, which is the family of blue. One thing I forgot to mention here is I would also include magenta. Just following up, again, here's what we call the secondary colors, and each one is really more closely grouped with one of the primary colors. So this is the way to really think about colors when you're trying to make some decisions. Think of it as these sort of broad families that include things of different intensities, include things of different values, and things with slight hue shifts within the category, right? Okay. So, all right, so I'm going to turn around now. So why these families, right? I think it's a really good way to think about it. It's a really good way to model it. But it's also, I think, the most helpful device when we start to talk about color selection. So now we're moving into, how do you choose a palette? So the basic idea is that when you choose a palette, what you want to do is you want to essentially remove something from the full spectrum. the easiest way to make a palette more specific and feel like it's unified and part of the same world is to take something out. So all the systems that we're going to talk about today are going to be all based around taking something out of the full range of colors. And that's the basic idea. And why do we do that? The overarching theory is this. We naturally see a full set of colors. Right? When we look at an image that an artist has created of the world, and we see it with a limited palette, what our brains do is they try to stretch or unfold or unpack that limited palette and match it to the bigger palette in the world, to the full range of colors. And doing that work and having it feel like it makes sense after you've unpacked it, after you've in your head translated it, and have it still make sense is very satisfying. Because what we want to do is we want to look for patterns and we want to solve them. That's what our brains want to do. So we take this limited palette and we try to apply it. It's what we think in our head is the real colors. And if we get that to work, we like it. Right? It's okay to ask people to do puzzles. And this goes for many things in art, as long as they get a reward for doing the work. This is the difference between work that seems, when you do work where you don't ask the viewer to do any sort of work, when you do art where you don't ask the viewer to do any sort of work, any sort of unpacking, that's often work that we consider boring. But if you ask the viewer to do work and they put the work into trying to solve it and they do not come up with a pattern, that's when we talk about the work being busy or confusing. If you're going to make someone go through a puzzle, they need to have the benefit of winning. They need to have the benefit of solving it. And as an overarching art philosophy, in terms of what works, right? And I'm not talking about, there's so many things, and you know, Jared's been my student and he knows this discussion can stretch into many things. But this is the basics of getting work to feel interesting, yet also satisfying. Okay, and it can be applied to many things, but it definitely applies to color. Okay, so let me just check. Now I'm just going to check on the camera because it should have charged up again and we can get back to our regular thing. So let's see if I've got this. Come on. Please tell me you charged. Yes, it did. Okay, I'm just going to pause this because for the poor people watching it later, they don't want to watch me just stand here and. Okay, so we got that working. So the first thing we're going to talk about are some of the well-known strategies that people use to come up with these systems, right? It's enough for me to say a color system involves taking something out, and a color system involves the viewer being able to solve it, to make sense of it. But what does that actually mean? Right? It's pretty conceptual. Let's actually take a look at what that means. Okay, so let me pin to this guy. Let's see. Oops, no, that's not the right way. These seem to be the place pin. There we go. Okay, so we're going to talk about a few systems and we're just going to see how far we get with them because I don't want to just, I want us to get some practice with them. So we're going to take them and take each one and do a little project. And then, you know, if we don't get to them all today, we're going to do them the rest tomorrow. The next class, excuse me. Okay. So, oh, not me. I'm moving I'm moving the computer, and I'm saying, why isn't the camera? Why isn't the picture moving? Okay. Okay. So this looks good. It's a little bit awkward because I'm left-handed and the camera's to my right, but let me see if I can get it down slightly. Okay. So, let's see, I'll put this over, put the cord over here. Put it behind. That should be good. Oh, no Google, stay away. Okay. So, we're going to talk about color systems now. First of all, as an overarching thing, all systems involve removing colors. From the available range. What do I mean by available range? I think it's self-explanatory, but that means what colors can you choose from, right? What colors do you have available to you? Okay, and all the systems we're going to talk about, they involve taking away something. And the very, very simplest and the most common, by far the most common, right? Is, and it has many different names in different industries and takes different forms. But I'm going to call it the two-tone. Two-tone. It's also could be thought of duotone, which means something specific in film, but it's very much related also in printing. Duotone, or also we're going to call it split. In painting, it's not a very precise term. We're going to call it split complementary. Okay, that's system. This is system number one. What does that mean? It means remove one color family. That's it. Simple, right? There are more specifics that people get into, but they're never particularly precise. The basics is that you take of the greens, the browns, and the grays, you just take one away. The other two, you can combine them in any combination you want. You can use any of the colors that are within those groupings, and you can also use ones that sort of sit on the border between them. Right? Any combination of that. And it is used all the time. And it is used, what's most interesting is that it is used across industries. It's used in film, in photography, in graphic design, of course, right? Graphic designers are very familiar with duotone prints, and sometimes that means the two colors kept separately, but it also can mean the two colors are allowed to mix. So it's done in graphic design. It's done in decorating. It's a very, very common technique for decorating. But here I think is, so I'm going to show you one example right now. I have a few more examples to show, but I'm just show you one just because I don't want to do this. I have to share the screen. I think this is good, yeah. And now I actually have to go to Chrome to, this is right, yeah. Right, and are you guys seeing, no, you're not, you're not seeing the screen. Huh. It says I'm screen sharing, but I don't see the screen on the screen. Are you guys seeing my screen?
Yeah, I see it.
Oh, okay. It doesn't show up for me. That is actually a little freaky, to be honest with you. Okay. Here's a great example. Okay. This is from the film Brave. You see it in cartooning all the time, but you also see it in films. Marvel does it constantly. Practically nothing gets out at Marvel without being duotone. This is a particular type of duotone. And this is what we would call, and it's not important that you memorize these terms, but this is what we would call, I like this example because it is what we would fall under the category of split complementary. And what does split complementary is a subsection of this. One area is removed, all right? So we basically have this sort of green in this, vaguely in this greenish category. And then of course we have this bright orange hair. And so the particular subsection called split complementary, what it means is that you let one color do most of the work. This blue-green is doing most of the work in here, okay? All the background, most of it is this blue-green color. This sort of green to cyan. And because it does most of the work, you let its range spread even further. Right? We give it more latitude. That's the split part in split complementary. Right? We let that other color have a big range. And then the other color, the most important color, we use less frequently, but we use it in a very specific way with less range. And the idea is that you're meant to draw attention to that color. And what's that color? That's the red hair, because that identifies the character.
Ian, what does it mean to let a color have range?
So in other words, what I mean by that is this blue-green category, we have a lot of different variations of blues and greens here.
Yeah.
We let it spread. And we let it do most of the work. Almost all of the, what we would say the desaturated color, right? Is all of it is in this blue-green category. It's not entirely, right? There's still some orange over here. They're in the kilts to the left, right? The dad on the right also has orangey hair. So it's not completely that there's orange only occurs in one spot, but it's heavily weighted toward the blue-green. This sort of cyanish in this category, and we let it go. So in other words, we've got blues and we've got greens. We even have yellowy greens. We let it sort of spread out. But the idea is that we're creating a world which is mostly that color so that the second color really stands out against it.
Got it.
Okay, and that's the sort of this thing where we remove one section of color. Right? There's no purples in this at all. There's no magentas, there's no reds in the entire image. It looks full color, right? We look at it and we don't say, oh, that's a tinted image, but there's no purples in the whole thing and no reds in the whole thing. So that whole section is out. Okay, we have this orange and we have this blue-green. Okay, I'm going to give you a simpler example, but I like this one because it's the most, it shows how complex it can be. Because to most people's eyes, they would say, oh, this is full spectrum. This isn't limited palette. But it is a limited palette. Okay, now, next category. I thought I saved a different one. Hold on. So I have to apologize because I have this whole, I've taught this course at the university and I went to pull it up and they had purged my, they had actually purged my files. So I have to dig them up. So I was only able to retrieve some of them for the class. So I will have a few more for next time, but the point is basically the same. So, okay. Here's an image from Hellboy. We've got this blue and we got this red colors together. Again, the same thing. The blue-green here is given the most range in order to give the red the most importance. All right, so I'm going to, during the break, I'm going to pull up a couple of these because I have them on here. I looked at them the other day. And in the meantime, the university archived them. So I apologize for that, but we'll have more.
Wes Anderson does this almost exclusively if you look up Wes Anderson stills.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. But Wes Anderson does some other things as well, which we will talk about. I mean, Wes Anderson, the palette of, who also does this quite a bit is Hitchcock. Mm-hmm. You'll see if you watch Vertigo, almost all of Vertigo is this particular, is a split palette as well. And also, if you look at many of the, a lot of the Studio Ghibli anime films, they also use this system a lot. Another one where you see it all the time because they're trying to emphasize the red color, and it's a great film, absolutely great film for color, is you'll see it again and again in The Incredibles, the Pixar movie. Okay, and most often that has to do with those red suits that they're really trying to highlight. Right, identifies them against everyone else. Okay, I should go back to me or go back to the table. Let me see, where the heck, did I just close me out? Hold on, no. Why is it doing that? I don't need to stop sharing the screen. Not sure, what are we seeing, right? This is, I'm having a problems recognizing the difference between Chrome and me. I don't know, why is this so different? Oh. Apologize for this, guys. Oh, that's a message. Stop sharing. Okay, now that's better. Okay. All right. So broadly speaking, the idea is to remove one family. Okay, now, the second system broadly speaking, oh, sorry. And that one I think is self-explanatory. And Wes Anderson does this a lot as well. And what's very interesting about Wes Anderson is that, and this is partly why people always talk about his very particular palette, is that he actually combines it. So he will take out a palette, or he will choose one color range, let's just say green, but he will then, within those two things, split it into, do a split complementary, meaning, let's just saying it's green, but he won't have any bright green. He'll have a bunch of colors that are greenish blue and a bunch of colors that are greenish yellow, but nothing that's straight green in the middle. So it's a double combination, if that makes sense. So he not only takes out, he only uses the green family, but he takes out the middle of that green. And so, which is why you get these highly pasteled palettes. And I have some Wes Anderson examples. Okay. So here's what I want to do, rather than just keep talking about these different systems, because I want to actually play with them. So this can actually be interesting. So if you happen to have a canvas board or something that you think would be better, that would be more permanent, this can actually make a design that's actually pretty interesting. So it's kind of worth keeping. You don't have to. It's totally, all of you are in some ways visual arts professionals. So, you know, it can also be just completely treated as an exercise. But if you happen to have something more permanent, and you want a nice sort of record of this class that you could kind of stick up on the wall or just stick in your studio, this is the exercise to do this with. Okay? So let me show you what I want to do now. So for a second, before we choose any colors, I'm going to show you the pattern. And I am going to indulge myself, because this happens to be my area of interest, which is patterns based on mathematics. Okay, and algorithm-based geometry. I better use the pencil because it's clearer. I got a nice thick pencil to use because it was going to be clearer. Okay, so if you've got a canvas board or something more permanent, you don't have to do this first step because you can just use the edge of your canvas. But if not, I recommend doing it this way, which is the very first thing is to just make a rectangle on the paper. It's going to, you'll see why that's helpful when we do the next steps. Okay, so just watch me for a second and I'll walk you guys through everything. Okay, I'll just do the full length. So I'm just making a rectangle. The rectangle size I don't particularly care about. And I can see that I've already probably not centered it, which is ideally, it would look prettier if it were centered, but that's okay. Because I'm sort of shoved to the side of this piece of paper that I'm working with. I didn't make that straight. I'm gonna make it again. Okay, just making a rectangle here. So between sitting to the side and the fact that I have pretty bad astigmatism, Everything tends to be slanted. I will warn you, by the way. I can never make right angles. They look right angles to me, depending on which eye I'm looking at. So, okay. So, first thing I want you to do is make some sort of line on your rectangle, or if you're using a canvas board, you don't have to do the outline. Make some sort of line on your rectangle, just cutting it in half. Doesn't have to be perfect. Okay. Now you're going to make another one, roughly cutting it in half again. Okay. They're not the same size. That's okay. As long as the regions are reasonably similar. And you can see there's a big difference between them, but there's enough room. Okay, now what I want you to do now is imagine, so now how many lines do we have on our screen? We have 6 lines on our screen, right? We've got on our paper, we've got the 4 lines that made up the rectangle. And if you're just using the canvas board, you can think of your edges as a line. Just imagine that they're a line, okay? And you've got the 2 lines that we made through the middle. Now, what I want you to do is imagine that every time you make a new line, the line it touches, you're cutting. All right, so our 4 lines here, right? So this is now its own line. Can everyone see that right here? Because this line cut it, right? And this is its own line, right? The same on the sides here, right? This and this. This line's been cut into this and this, and this and this, okay? Here and here, here and here, right? Been cut. Okay, and now these 2 lines that are crossing each other have also been cut. So how many lines do we have total? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Okay, everyone get that idea? Now, every time you're going to draw a new line, you're basically, and again, if you don't get this perfect, it's totally fine. It just makes for an interesting pattern. Okay, and it's also, as I said, it lets me kind of indulge my own personal interests, as you can see behind you, both the prints up there and the stuff on the wall. Okay, so now you've got these lines. What I want you to do is keep drawing lines that connect the midpoints of two of the lines you already have, right? We have 12 lines here. So 2 midpoints. So I'm just going to say that's about a midpoint, right? Right there. And I'm going to say this is about a midpoint, right? Between here and here. Does everyone get that? So I'm just going to draw a line connecting it. But it could be anywhere, right? Now I could draw a line. This is now its own line. It's been cut by the line I just made. So its midpoint's around here. And I'm going to connect it, say, to this one. About here. Right? Now, what ones do I want to do? Oh, maybe this one to this one now, right? I've got this space right here. Midpoint's about right there. I'll connect these 2. But it can be any. I'm just doing it randomly, right? We keep going around. Okay, so let's do that about at least 20 of those cuts, at least 20 of those shapes. Okay, and then that's that will be our, this is what we're going to be painting tonight. Totally randomly, all over the place. So anywhere you like. I have to do some of this. I have to actually reach through the. Okay, is anyone confused by that? Did that make sense what I asked for? Okay, good. All right, I'm gonna just pin this thing so everyone can just see me work now. Remove pin. There we go.
Ian, I wasn't in the room. When I got back, it looked like you were connecting midpoints.
Midpoint. So yeah, so we've got the 4 lines. You could also think if you're working edge to edge, you can also think of the edge as 4 lines, the edge of your paper or the edge of your canvas. And then first we drew 2 bisecting lines, just things that went across. Now, the thing is that from what you want to think of is every time you draw a line between 2 lines, you're cutting that line, right? So after I drew this line, for example, this line was cut into this section and then this whole section, right? And so now you can make a new line, but always from what's approximately the midpoint of 1, right? Because this is now 1 line, the midpoint of 1 to the midpoint of another. Doesn't matter where, right? In this case, this one, because this is a line.
Okay, cool.
And just keep doing it over and over again. Now, for anyone who's interested in the mathematics of this, one variation of it, not for you guys to do now, but one variation of it is that you're always dividing, rather than just picking a random one, you're always dividing the longest lines first. And if you do that, that actually will resemble the pattern in which, for example, mud will crack when it dries, or the way ice will shatter when it breaks, right? Always it will give you the pattern. And the idea being that, of course, it will tend to break in the longest section first before the shorter section, and will tend to break somewhere near the middle. And so actually, when you do it, it does actually follow patterns that you see in nature.
How many spaces should we have?
So let me see. Let's see yours. Let's put, sorry, let's put it
I don't
up.
think I can see it.
Let's see.
Oh, I counted and there's like 31.
Okay, hold on. Remove pin. And I don't know why it does the pins now. Okay, I can't quite see it. Let's see, can you get it closer? Yeah, that's thing. Maybe make a few more. It's just a bit more fun.
Okay, cool.
You have a pretty big sheet of paper, so. Is it a canvas paper or is it actual paper? Canvas paper. Yeah, okay. Yeah, then you should make a few more. The design will be, and like it when you like it, stop.
It's a lot to ask.
Yeah,
Okay.
well, that's true. That's true. So, okay, so one of the things to give for the folks who want to be really ambitious about it. So remember that I had you doing 2 crossing lines at the beginning. So that divides let me put this thing back up again. Replace pin, okay? So these 2 lines here, right? this line and this line, the bisecting lines, right? That cut the frame in half. So we're doing 4 colors. So this created 4 regions. This one, this one, this one, and then this one. So we're going to be doing each of the 4 regions using a different one of the systems we talk about. So for you, Mina, if you want to be really ambitious and do a lot, just make sure that you get what you want in at least 2 of the sections, 2 of the quadrants, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And again, it's an exercise, so don't worry. I'm not super worried about it. It's just that it can look quite nice. So if you want to keep it, you can also do it another time if you want as well.
Actually, I just turned it upside down and now I like it. So.
Oh, okay. Well, then there you go. So this is the first. Exercise. And so what we're going to be doing is now I just simply want you to, as I said, pick 2 of the quadrants, preferably 2 that are next to each other. I think it tends to work better. And I want you to do one where you're doing it in a monotone, meaning you're picking one color family and you can use any colors within that color family. And then the other one where you do a duotone. But I'd specifically like you to pick one where you emphasize where one color does more of the work, has more things, and another color has more of the sparkle, has more of the pizzazz, it's more the spot color. Like that red, just keep thinking about that picture from Brave and that red hair, which they really wanted to highlight. Okay, that's the more complex. And since all of you have backgrounds in this, it's perfectly fine to do them 50-50. It's generally more effective when you make one of the colors sort of the star and then the other color sort of the supporting actors behind it. Okay, and that gets into when we talk about the split complementary. All right, so we're just going to go and paint. So I'm actually going to take a slight break right now. I need to use the restroom. But when we get back, we're going to start to paint. And then at a certain point, I'm going to bring in the other systems as well. But let's just see how it goes tonight. And if we have to get to them next time, we will. I just don't want to get into the situation where I'm just listing the same, a whole bunch of things one after the other. So we'll just do these 2 right now, and then we'll do the next 2, which are a little bit more complex.
So one quadrant is monotone and one quadrant is duotone?
Yes, exactly. One is one family, one is 2 families.
The
One
color?
is the Hatfields and one is the Hatfield and McCoys. Or the Capulets and the, whoever they are, the Romeo and Juliet, yeah. Bergamots, or, no, not Bergamots.
Capulets.
Capulets and the other one, yes. So, okay, so you can do that. Now, remember, you're mixing, in this case, you're using paint. So you still can use all of your colors to mix the paint. But if, for example, you're picking the green and the brown, you can use the blue family to make your greens and make your browns. They can be an element when you mix. They just can't be one of the colors, the color that you mix together cannot fall within the gray family if you're taking out the grays. That make sense? Okay, so
Can the monotone color also be included with the duotone colors?
yes,
Okay.
absolutely. And actually, it's not a bad thing to do it because sometimes it's useful to see the comparison. Actually, you know what? Actually, thank you. Let's see. So Mina, yeah, thank you. I'm actually going to take your suggestion. And so the monotone, I want one of the in the duotone, I want one of the colors, one of the families to be the family used in the monotone. So, so Mina demanded it, and I think we have to. I think she was right. I'm joking. I'm joking. I'm joking. But no, it's actually a good point because it's good to see what the difference is. Okay, but remember, within those families, it's all of those colors. It's not just using, say, if you're using red, it's not just a matter of taking out red and white paint. You can mix anything that falls within the broad category of the browns, anything in that reddish family, right? Browns, oranges, beiges, all of that is considered, magentas, all of that is considered to be within the red family. Okay? So, yeah, so we'll get to that. So I'm gonna just pause the recording for a second while I run to the restroom and to get some water, and then we'll just pick up. Okay, so I apologize for this, guys, because I literally just said this without recording it, so I have to say it again. It feels so artificial. But what I wanted to point out is that even within a monochromatic, when you're working within a monochromatic palette, right? It doesn't mean that you have to, even though you've restricted yourself to a smaller set of colors, it doesn't mean you need to use every single one of the colors within that range that you've given yourself. You still have some of the same structures that we talked about. So you can still, within that world, create limitations. So I was saying to Lucy before, for example, if you were working within a red monochromatic palette, you may have just a couple of pieces in the room that you want to highlight. And so those could be the only ones, for example, where the red is toward purple, or where the red is a lighter red or a brighter red. You're still making judgments about which colors to use. You're just limiting the space in which you can use them. Okay, so it's the same sorts of color instincts still apply. It's not simply, picking a random red crayon out of the crayon box. Okay, so the same goes through for the duotone, for the complementary. Again, I don't like that term because, just to give you guys a little bit of background about color theory, there was a time, particularly in the Renaissance, but also before the Renaissance, where artist studios were considered to be really contributing to science. And so this goes back to Roman times. It also goes back to, particularly to the times of medieval times, when there were the Arabian empires that were in many ways kind of holding culture, holding scientific culture at that time. And so the artists were considered to also be scientists, and they actually contributed to the sciences and to mathematics in a way that is still used today. And that went through the Renaissance. And so that also included color theory. At a certain point, it completely diverged, and it was no longer considered scientific. And while I consider those things to be really important, and they're really important in terms of the history of art, what I mean by those things, the things that artists, the color theory that artists came up with after the sort of scientific age, in my mind, I'd like to sort of retrieve it and pull it back to its sort of scientific roots. And so things like complementary colors are a little bit, because it assumes a color wheel, and we talked about color isn't on a wheel, it's on a spectrum. So the complementary thing is not quite a real thing. Warm and cool is not at all a real thing. So we're sort of, that's why I'm a little bit hesitant to use split complementary, but it is still very much used as a term in all the creative fields. pin it to this one again. There we go. Okay. All right. So one other thing I wanted to mention was that we will, I think given the time frame, I think we will probably go over the other two color systems next time. I'll also have more examples. And then what I talked about before, talking about spatial dynamics, which is kind of another topic. It falls under this category, but it's sort of an extra element. If we don't get to it, then we'll do a shorter session that I'll record, and you guys are welcome to do live, but you'll also have it available to you to watch as kind of like a seventh supplementary class. And it will also be a preview of the next class that hopefully we're going to be doing at BDR, which will be specifically focusing on value, but value as it relates to spatial dynamics. So it's in a way, it's kind of a precursor of the next course. Of course, in this case, we will be applying it specifically to color. Okay, so now I need to get painting. Enough chit chat. Oh, what do I want? Blue. Not too red. No, I've got blue here. I'll do blue. So So one thing I want to mention as well for Lucy and Mina, this is where the whole thing comes in of color trends as well. Color trends, as you know, come and go. They're sometimes chosen. They're sometimes very much a kind of they're a function of the industry. They're a function sometimes of certain things that have become popular, but the same rules still apply. So it's part of what makes, if you can use these color dynamics, these color systems that I talked about, you can apply them to any of the colors that are trendy or popular at the moment. And what will happen is that they will tend to still look good after the trend fades a little bit as well. Of course, beige and mauve or the sort of brown and blue in the early aughts and things like that, they'll always be associated with those eras. There's nothing you could do about it. But you can still do it in a way that is going to be more timeless and more interesting to look at even after the trend fails, even after the trend passes. I mean.
What makes them more timeless? I missed something. What makes them more timeless? Is it the using these systems is what makes them more...
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you can take one of those, you can take one of these popular colors and just apply it to this system. Very often when it's not done well, what happens is that the colors are popular and they just pop up everywhere. Or they're not really done, for example, very dynamically. It's not really done as a true kind of split complementary. They just try to get as many elements. So they pick the one color, the green or the magenta or whatever, or sometimes a pair of colors, slap in some black and white, and then the room is just full of them. Yeah. It's not that interesting. What you have to do is build a base where you're using all the things in the family and then allowing that base to cause certain colors to really be highlighted. And that will make that much more dynamic.
Yeah.
There are certain furniture and design stores that tend to be very much on the trendy color, and they just basically put the same shade of that color. They just throw it all over the place, thinking that people will feel more comfortable buying things because these two things are exactly the same and they match. Of course, it looks awful in the house.
Yeah.
I mean, that's your business, obviously. That's your industry. That's why people hire you. But as you know, it looks awful, awful. So.
Yeah, at the moment, I'm working on a color collection, and I think it's been brewing in my head for a while. And since starting the class here with you, I think it's starting to make a little bit more sense. And I've set it out in a way that which I didn't realize, but nobody else has done it. And I've given a base 4 colors that can mix with any 3 top colors, and then to cover the spectrum of the colors that we choose. Of course, nothing too crazy trendy at the moment, because we're trying to keep it, like you said, also just to last and to be timeless in that way. But somehow with everything that you're teaching us, it's coming together in my head that it is, and now today it's just, my mind is just going crazy. I'm just listening and absorbing everything. There's so much, and no, it's I'm having a lot of fun.
Oh, that's good. That's good.
Yeah.
And that also makes the point about what I said before, which is about the neutrals, which is about which are desaturated colors, really doing a lot of the work, right? If you get those colors, you have a lot of choices in your cushions and your slip covers and your things like that, if you get the structure of those neutrals correct. And that's really that's the type of thing we're talking about in terms of how really the desaturated colors, the ones that people don't notice, they really do all the work in the room.
Absolutely. Yeah. Also in our industry, very much. Yeah.
Yeah. And they're the tougher ones to pick in a lot of ways, you know? Oh,
They can
sandy
be.
gray or gray sand. Oh, I don't know.
Yeah, and it depends on the light and the time of day, and it changes and it moves. But those are the best ones, the ones that move with the day and still fit your feeling and your interior. You know, those are, and that's hard to find, but it's a fun job.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
I would think so, actually. It does seem fun.
yeah,
It's
It
funny,
really
you know, what I really love about design in a lot of ways is that, and for artists, this is a certain, it's also, it's really, really useful. Even these design shows on TV sometimes, and some of them seem more cheesier than others and more manufactured than others.
Yeah.
But that it gets back to this thing that even though as artists, we're trying to sometimes deal with really serious concepts, difficult to grasp concepts. When you go in and you see someone who knows nothing about color walking into a room, and even if it's a room that's relatively neutral, and you can tell they feel like it works.
Yeah.
And even as artists, as we try to deal with really difficult concepts, you still want, that's what makes art and not an academic paper, right?
Yeah.
Is that
Yeah.
it still has to work. It's still what you want to evoke, sometimes goods, all sorts of different types of feelings. But the fact that, you know, they go in and they see this room and they can feel it without knowing how it's working, you know, same way with food in many ways, right? And that's important. And that's what ties that industry into, you know, what you see in museums. It's really true. I really believe that 100%.
Yeah.
Okay, now back to work.
Yeah.
Oops, I did, yeah, okay. I need to make some colors. I should probably be putting my palette on this. Where's the yellow? Got to fill up my water cups. I'll be right back.